Today, we're going to dive into a pretty sobering piece of analysis. It's called the nuclear horizon, and it tackles one of our biggest fears by asking one single, really critical question. So let's just get right to it. In the absolute worst-case scenario, a full-blown nuclear war, where on Earth could you actually go? I mean, is there any place left that would be genuinely safe? To even begin to answer that, you first have to understand the sheer scale of what we're talking about. So let's start at ground zero, the immediate aftermath, that very first hour after a bomb goes off. What's just so mind-boggling is how fast this all happens. At second zero, it's not a sound, it's a flash of light so bright and hot, it's like a piece of the sun on Earth. Just 5 seconds later, the shockwave hits, this invisible wall of force that just demolishes everything for miles. Then, within 10 minutes, all the fires that started from the heat begin to merge into one giant, uncontrollable firestorm that literally creates its own weather. And to top it all off, within that first hour, the danger turns invisible as radioactive fallout starts silently drifting back down to the ground. But here's the thing, the horror doesn't just stay in the blast zone. Not even close. It escalates, and fast, into a full-blown global catastrophe. And that brings us to the long-term consequences, a world plunged into shadow. The main threat here is a terrifying concept called nuclear winter. Just try to imagine the smoke and soot from hundreds of burning cities getting blasted high up into the atmosphere. All that gunk would create a thick, dark layer, basically shrouding the entire planet and blocking sunlight for years. And without the sun, global temperatures would just plummet. And this is where you see the awful domino effect. No sunlight means no crops. That leads to catastrophic, widespread famine. Global supply chains, they don't just slow down, they vanish overnight. And from there, it's a quick slide into total societal breakdown. Governments, communication, infrastructure, all gone. And all this time, that lingering radiation is poisoning everything and everyone left. Okay, so that's an incredibly grim picture. But this is where the analysis takes a turn. It pivots from the problem to a more logical question. What would a country actually need to survive this? Which leads us to the survival checklist. What exactly makes a nation resilient? It turns out any potential safe haven has to meet 3 incredibly high standards. First up, geographic isolation. It has to be far, far away from the main conflict zones, which are mostly in the northern hemisphere. Second, self-sufficiency. Because when global trade is gone, you have to be able to feed your people and power your country. No exceptions. And third, political stability. The government has to be strong enough to not just collapse into chaos and civil war when things get bad. So keeping those 3 things in mind, isolation, self-sufficiency, stability, what nations could possibly make the cut? Well, this leads us to the most fascinating part of the analysis, identifying what might just be Earth's last sanctuaries, the 2 safest nations on the planet. Okay, so the first contender is described as a large nation deep in the southern hemisphere with a ton of its own agricultural resources. And that nation is Argentina. So, why Argentina? Well, it ticks all the boxes. Its location, way down south, gives it that crucial isolation. The analysis suggests it would be more resilient to the massive temperature drops from a nuclear winter, and maybe most importantly, it's an agricultural powerhouse. It has the self-sufficiency to feed its own people with crops like wheat and corn. Now for the second potential safe haven, this one is even more remote. We're talking about an island nation shielded by huge stretches of empty ocean. That country is New Zealand. New Zealand's superpower, really, is its extreme isolation. It's just not a strategic target for anybody. It also has the modern infrastructure and the farmland to be completely self-sufficient. And finally, its famous political stability and its non-nuclear stance make it the other top candidate for writing out the apocalypse. But the analysis doesn't just end there with a tidy little answer. It finishes by forcing us to face a much deeper, much more unsettling question. It makes us completely rethink what the word safety even means. You know, there's this chilling phrase you often hear when people talk about nuclear war. The survivors would envy the dead. And it really forces you to ask, what is the point of surviving? Is a life in a cold, dark, radioactive world where everyone is starving, is that really a life worth living? And that is the final, haunting thought this analysis leaves us with. Even if you somehow made it to Argentina or New Zealand, you're still living on a planet with a shattered ecosystem. In a world bound together by the very air we breathe and the oceans that touch every shore, is anywhere or anyone truly